Today we're putting on our power armor, revving up our chainswords, and diving into Space Marine 2. This game had one job: let me smash massive hordes of Tyranids into paste while looking badass. But the question is, did it deliver? You're goddamn right it did, and just like every servo skull, it's got some quirks, but let's talk about it. One thing I do want to say before we get started is this will be a spoiler review, so I'm going to be showing and talking about parts of the game that might spoil some parts of the game for you. So if you don't want to see any spoilers of this, don't watch this video. I'll find and link below a spoiler-free Warhammer review. I think the Game Ranks guys usually do spoiler-free stuff, so I'll probably link one of their videos below. But I am going to be spoiling some stuff just with the gameplay footage that's shown in the video. I'm also not going to be diving too deep into Warhammer lore. I think this game is a great intro to Warhammer if you know nothing about Warhammer. I don't think you need to know exactly what happened in the events of Space Marine 1 to play and enjoy Space Marine 2. I think you should watch like a YouTube video or just kind of talking about the events of Space Marine 1 so you can kind of get a grasp of what happened if you want to, but it's not needed at all. This game is a standalone piece. It's very, very fun to play without knowing every nuanced part of the lore of Warhammer. But again, this is a great intro to it. It has turned me on to the world of Warhammer 40k. So I definitely recommend watching the Space Marine 1 like walkthrough or just a summary video of it. That's what I did. But it's not needed at all. But again, it's a very good introduction into a universe and world chock full of incredible lore. So after you play this game, I highly recommend watching lore videos because as deep as you think it goes insanely deeper. So the levels to it are insane, and I definitely recommend diving down that rabbit hole because it was a fun time for sure. Let's get into the review.
Moving to lost contact with brother. Approaching orbital launcher facility. Well secure.
Hellstros, Alpha! I'm moving to the crash site. Do you read?
All right, let's talk about the gameplay. The combat here is kind of like if Doom Guy and Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War teamed up like on E-Day in the Gears of War universe. You've got a great mix of melee and ranged combat working together like peanut butter and chainswords. The gory executions are the highlight of this game. They are just chef's kiss beautiful. And weapons like the Thunderhammer and the Plasma Incinerator just scream, your heresy ends here. One of the parts of the gameplay that I want to highlight is actually the gun strike system. So I know like the executions are really cool and maybe just the gunplay overall is really cool, but the gun strike system is pretty unique. It is kind of akin to the Gears of War like active reload system where, you know, it's just kind of like a quick time event almost, but it definitely adds like a layer of depth to the gameplay and to the fighting mechanic that just really it's really appreciated. It adds a lot to the actual gameplay itself. But there are some downsides. In the chaos, pulling off some moves like grabbing enemies or doing a gun strike can feel like kind of like you're fumbling for the TV remote while your house is on fire. And sometimes playing solo, you'll kind of feel like the one guy in the group project that's doing all of the work. The only other real concern I have is the kind of lack of weapon variety. I found myself mostly using like the plasma based weapons just because they sound a little bit different and just have the most variety based on just the actual difference in the gun. I feel like a lot of the other guns are it's just an arsenal of like different bolt weapons that we got to choose from. So while very cool, they were all basically the same thing. One just maybe shot faster, one had a scope, that kind of thing. So there was a kind of a bit of lack of variety in terms of which guns you could use. But I do like the different amount of melee weapons and how each one was catered towards a different style. Maybe it was dueling, maybe it was crowd control, that kind of thing. So I do like the variety in melee weapons that we had. I just wish we had a little bit more variety with the actual ranged weapons in the game. With all of that being said, still, gameplay earns a glorious 160 out of 200 points. Praise the Emperor.
It was a long time ago. I prefer not to discuss it.
At least you made it out alive, which is more than we can say for the orcs.
We have their attention.
And they have ours.
Unfortunate for them.
Visually, this game is straight up a Warhammer 40k art exhibit. The hive cities are gothic. The battlefields are so big that they make Jay-Z's 99 Problems feel tiny, and the Tyranid swarms are the highlight of the visual experience of this game. They're like an unholy wave of ants on steroids, and it looks amazing. This game was actually developed by the same developers of World War Z, the zombie game that was very popular for a while, and I think still has a pretty dedicated fan base, but they're kind of known for that huge swarm of enemies coming at you, and you know, I think they perfected the process. It looks amazing in this game. The only real catch here is the swarms are visually stunning, but don't always hit as hard as you'd expect. And if you really pay attention to the swarms themselves, the pathing of the AI and the overall intelligence of the AI can kind of be exposed a little bit. There's a lot of times where you'll watch them when they're climbing up the walls and they either just sit there and don't really move, or maybe they'll fall back down. And it's kind of just, it feels like it's there to make the pacing kind of scripted in a way, which is fine, but it's very noticeable if you're paying attention to it in the game. So it's kind of like ordering like a triple espresso at a coffee shop and getting a decaf. So it's a little bit disappointing, but I'm still giving it 90 out of 100 points because honestly, I would hang screenshots of this game in my living room.
Praise the Emperor. The wound was fatal. You survived only through the Rubicon surgery. We remade you. You are a Primaris now.
Now for the story, Space Marine 2 kicks off with Captain Titus dealing with a demotion and trying to figure out who stole his blue crayon. It's an intriguing start with some solid team dynamics and a peek at the emotional struggles of what the Ultramarines would go through. But spoiler alert, emotions are difficult when you're a walking tank with feelings. But in the second half, the plot decides to take the scenic route through Trope Town. It's full of fan service, which is really fun, but it misses a chance to dive deeper into that 40k lore that I think would have been really cool. And one more thing I did want to touch on is the length of the game. I feel like a lot of people have brought up in their reviews that the length of the game is very short, and that's why it might not be worth your $60 or $70, however much the game is right now. One thing I will say is the campaign is very short, but the replayability of the PvE and PvP modes is what stands out to me in this game. I think the campaign was the exact length it needed to be to get the point across and make the game feel like what it was. The gameplay loop of this game would not have benefited from a longer campaign. If this game was 10 to 15 hours long, I don't think that it would have been as fun and it would have felt dragged out, because the gameplay loop of, you know, just killing all of these swarms of enemies would have felt repetitive at that point. It already was teetering towards that point towards the end of this campaign. So I think that they picked a perfect length for this campaign to get the point of the game across, and you know, you're playing it and feeling how fun it is to be this super soldier and just destroy these swarms of enemies. If it was any longer, I feel like it would have been more of a detriment than like a positive change. Still, it's worth 35 out of 50 points. It's like a popcorn movie. It's not deep, but it's fun to watch.
My bolter will silence you!
Performance-wise, the game ran as smooth as an Ultramarine's bald head. Co-op modes handled the chaos of dynamic swarms beautifully, and there's barely a glitch in sight. I ran into little to no bugs in my playthrough of this game. There are some FPS dips during the big fight scenes, but that's expected given the amount of stuff that's happening on screen at any given time. Overall, the game handles those moments very, very well. I played on PC. I have a pretty decent rig, and I saw very few noticeable FPS drops. The only hiccup I really had performance-wise was the multiplayer menus. They're about as intuitive as assembling IKEA furniture without instructions, but with everything else working so well, we're going to give performance a well-deserved 45 out of 50 points. Let's talk audio. The orchestral score in this game is another chef's kiss. Epic enough to make you feel like you're leading a crusade, and the weapon sounds and Tyranid screeches, perfectly gross and totally immersive. But here's the thing, sometimes the soundtrack is a little too extra. It drowns out the satisfying crunch of the weapons, and it's like a battle for your ears. Do I want that epic music in the background, or do I want those sick combat sounds? So it's kind of a battle, but again, still 40 out of 50 points because it slaps either way.
It is even bigger up close. Good.
We must turn the cannons on it.
Now finally, let's talk about the extras. So co-op operations mode is the MVP here, very clear cut, with 6 missions to chew through and a post-launch content roadmap that screams, we're in this for the long haul. I love this from the developers. I wish we had more games that release roadmaps like this for the future of the game and the life cycle of the game. I also thought the operations were really cool because you get to see basically a different part of the mission that you already did in the campaign. So essentially in the campaign, if you were to split up like your battalion of people into 2 different objectives, you only in the campaign see what you did as Titus. But in the operation, you get to see what happened with the other squad and what they did. The PvE mode also has a really nice class-based system, which allows you to kind of experiment with different abilities and classes in the game. So that's a nice addition to give a lot of replayability, and each class has their own like experience tree. There's a lot of in-depth customization with this game in the PvE-based modes. I really wish we could have seen it in the campaign, but I understand the creative decision not to do that. But being able to, you know, build this Space Marine and make him look badass, and using all of the different cosmetics in the game to, you know, build different legions and whatever in the 40k lore is really, really cool. And I'm glad that this customization made it into the game. I think it's definitely something that should have been in the game to make you feel like you're creating your own super soldier basically, but I'm really glad it's in there, and the PvE modes are better because of it. I think co-op wouldn't have been as fun if the customization and the class system wasn't there, so that was definitely a good move by them adding it. It definitely just gives that game an extra layer of replayability, because a lot of the times it can feel repetitive, but I think they knocked it out of the park with this PvE mode. PvP multiplayer feels like a bit of an afterthought, but hey, it's fun enough to keep you entertained between Tyranid massacres, and obviously it's not meant to be the focal point of the game. While it feels like an afterthought, it's solid enough of a PvP experience to be passable. So all that being said, I'm going to give this a 45 out of 50 points. Co-op chaos for the win. I'm always down for some couch co-op fun stuff. All right. Let's add up the numbers with a grand total of 415 points. If Space Marine 2 is on your Steam wishlist or your game wishlist in general on console, whatever it is, shut up and take my money. This game is a must play for Warhammer fans, action junkies, anyone who enjoys smashing alien bugs into goo. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Are you jumping into the grim dark madness, or are you waiting for the Tyranids to bring a snack? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for some more reviews. Like I said in my previous videos, 2025, I want to play all the games in my backlog, and I'm going to review every single one of them in style like this, just because I want to get these out here. I want to make content for you guys. But until next time, remember, the Emperor protects. Unless you're TikTok in the USA.
Rise, son of Gilliman.